Comic Book Savant, episode 442. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, we're going to be doing a countdown episode. Hadn't done one in a little bit, and I came up with a weird and really, I don't know if it's weird, but it's really a comic book nerdy countdown list. Probably more so than any I've ever done in 13 years of doing a podcast. But before we get into that and I reveal to you what the super nerdy topic is for Countdown, I'd just like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. If you're interested or looking for more comic book related podcasts to listen to similar to mine, it is a one-stop shop where you can go. There are literally hundreds of different podcasts listed, all related to comic books or geek culture in general. You can find podcasts that are a single-person podcast like myself, or you can find a roundtable discussion type podcast or where it's multiple hosts. You can find podcasts on individual characters or publishers, or even like if you have a favorite team book. I've even seen team-related podcasts listed there as well. So you have a lot to choose from. And also it can be used as a resource if you are starting out in podcasting about comics and you want to try to grow and expand your audience, especially when you're first starting out. You can actually contact the administrator. You can email the administrator through the homepage and see about getting added on to the network. So it can be a great tool to help you gain exposure with a new audience when you're starting out, when you're trying to grow a listening base. So it can be a good resource as well. And you can, possibly meet other podcasters as well and help each other cross-promote to grow each other's channel. So that's definitely something you might want to look into. So if you're interested in any of those things I mentioned, stop by the Comics Podcast Network. Again, it's comicspodcast.com and go check it out. All right. Now, with all that being said, we're going to jump into the topic of this episode, which is going to be a countdown episode. And I don't even remember how I came up with this. It was just like on a whim. But I came up with a concept to do a countdown episode on bases or bases of operations or fortresses that superheroes have. And I thought it would be kind of neat and kind of cool. And I was kind of surprised that far as I can remember, I haven't ever done like a top 10 or a countdown related episode on this topic before, which is kind of hard after doing, 440 some odd episodes, that I found a topic that I haven't covered at least once in some type of form or fashion. But I racked my brain and I went through as many of my notes as I could. And I was like, I really don't think I've ever talked about this before. So I thought it was a cool and kind of a challenge. So the bases or hideouts or whatever you want to call them are in no particular order, but they're going to be just some of my overall favorites, and I'll go into why. First and foremost, I have to say the Batcave. Maybe if I had to rank these, maybe the Batcave would be my number one. I'm a huge, Batman fan. The Batcave has gone through so many different iterations in the comics and from what we've seen in television shows and in movies. But it's always cool and like cutting edge and very innovative. And it's always cool to see when a new, creative team comes on, the Batman book, or you're going to see it in a Batman movie. It's one of those things you're always excited to see, like how you're excited to see how they're going to revamp the Batmobile. It's like the next biggest thing is like, what are they going to do with the Batcave? So I always, love to see all the different updates and see how many different takes. And it's, like I said, over the years, it's been through all the different mediums Batman has been in. We've seen literally probably if not 100 different variations or takes on the Batcave. And most times I never probably seen one I didn't like. They always are kind of cool and eye-catching. So Batcave for me is one on the list. The next one for me would be the Justice League Watchtower. Now when depending what era you grew up in and how you were exposed to like the Justice League, or like for me when I was a little kid coming up, I was, like I said, I was an 80s kid. So I grew up with like the Super Friends cartoon, which is kind of the Justice League, but just in cartoon form. And then later, as I got older, reading the actual Justice League comic books, and they had the Hall of Justice, similar to what they had in the cartoons. And then when Grant Morrison came on the book, when they dubbed the book JLA, which is the comic that really sparked the uptick in popularity back in the Justice League, because they were kind of struggling at the time. Grant Morrison came over to DC. They put out a new book, just JLA. He came up with the concept of the Watchtower, which later was used in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoons as well. I think they had another space base before that. I think it was like the Justice League Satellite. But this was like a kind of revamped, sleek, really cool version of that concept, kind of magnified in the Watchtower. I really dug that iteration of it, and they revamped that a few times over the years, and they switch back and forth. Sometimes they're off, like in a Watchtower in space and in the atmosphere. Then they went back in a while in one of the runs, like after Grant Morrison, they went back to like the Hall of Justice, and I think in the current Scott Snyder Justice League, they're back to the Hall of Justice, but it's like huge because it's different divisions of the Justice League now. So you have the regular Justice League Dark, and Justice League like Odyssey. So it's like it's way more massive, and a whole new concept take on like the Hall of Justice. But I always dug the Satellite more than I liked the Hall of Justice for some reason. I just thought it was cooler to me. Next up, I would say Nightwing's apartment. And I had to be very specific about this because Nightwing normally doesn't have like a hideout or a base operation like the Batcave like Batman does. But during his original series run, Volume 1 of Nightwing, within particularly during the Chuck Dix and the Scott McDaniels run, which really runs within the first 48 or 50 some issues of that Volume 1 of Nightwing, it's revealed in the story that from the insurance money, that it was an insurance policy out on Dick's parents. Bruce basically took that money, put it in a trust, and all those years it had gained interest, and he had owned shares like in the Haley Circus, and all this stuff had compounded. And even though that he was Bruce's ward and son, adopted son, he had his own fortune, and it was revealed to him during this run that he was basically a millionaire on his own. And so he got a hold of this money. The building he was living in Bloodhaven, I think, was going to be evicted or sold or knocked down. He found out he had this money. He bought the building. While he bought the building, he did some renovations and basically made him kind of like a really dope kind of, apartment, kind of a secret base. And it was really kind of cool. He had like some hidden compartments where you can get up to the roof, and he had like a little recovery area where it was tucked away in between the walls, and had a whole hidden staircase and things like that. It was really nifty. I think you can find these things, and this was really cool because back in the day, you don't see it too much anymore. DC still does like their 80-page giants sometimes, and they'll do little things like this. A lot of times when I was growing up, Marvel and DC would do these like encyclopedias. I think DC's was called Who's Who. Marvel's was called the Marvel Universe Handbook. And, it would be basically an encyclopedia of like everything in the universe. And it would even go in depth, and it would show, even like the superheroes, like if they had a hideout, they would show it and show a diagram of it. They would have floor plans and the whole nine. I went back and I had to Google these because I used to have these these books physically. I don't have them now. And I was trying to dig to remember where some of this stuff, where I could see, these diagrams and stuff. I did a search on the internet. I found the one for Nightwing. I think it was from a Nightwing 80-page giant somewhere, and it shows like the floor plan and like all the like modifications that he made, and like they show like the hollowed out like apartment and like all the different modifications he made to it, which was like really cool. And like in the Marvel handbook or Marvel Universe handbook, they would do the same thing where they would show floor plans and different things like that. So it wouldn't be just what we saw in the comics. They would actually have like floor plans and diagrams and layouts, architecture layouts, that you could really see how cool and where are these nifty things that they would hide, where they would be at. And I love that stretch. He even had his own car. He even had his really souped up like muscle car as well during that time period. I think he also had a motorcycle too. And they kind of did away with all that with Nightwing, but I'm not going to talk about Nightwing because I just get so upset about all the stuff that's going on with the character now. But back then I really thought that was cool and it really fit him. He was nothing super extravagant like the Batcave, but it was minimalist and just enough for a more grounded character like Nightwing. Next on my list, I would have to go with another like classic, which is the Baxter Building from the Fantastic Four. It's just the huge building that they had so much stuff going on. I just always remembered being a kid, and I always loved teen books, so I was always buzzing around the Fantastic Four, especially in the 80s with Walt Simonson drawing and writing it, John Byrne drawing and writing it, and even later in the 90s. When Scott Lobdell and Mark Waid and Carlos Pacheco, so many different people wrote on the book, and I always would, be fascinated on different takes they would do on the Baxter Building, or how they would update it as the time and the decades changed, how they updated and always made it snazzy, slick, and cool. So I was like, that would be a cool place that if I was a superhero, I want to hang out at the Baxter Building sometimes. It's just a cool place. Next on the list is the X Mansion. And this one was kind of a weird one to put on the list because I was like, well, gosh, the X Mansion is synonymous with the X-Men, but it's been blown up so many times. If you've ever seen any X-Men movie, or if you ever read an X-Men comic for over a year, you've seen the X Mansion blown up at least once, if not twice, if you're not lucky in a year's time. If you just ever read, at any point in time, if you ever read like a year to year and a half run straight of the X-Men, you at some point seen that X Mansion blown up. It's just a thing that they do. It's like a running joke in comics how many times the X Mansion has been destroyed and rebuilt in that whole universe. But it's still cool because it's a school, it's a home, it's a headquarters. So I always like that part, that it's everything to them, and how like they're shunned by society, but the one sanctuary they kind of always had is the X Mansion where they could come back to. Next, I'm going to have on my list the Avengers Mansion. Now, we've seen Avengers Tower, and especially with the MCU movies, they've made like the Avengers Tower kind of a thing. But for many years, and like I said, I'm dating myself by stating I was a kid of the 80s, and I read a lot of Avengers in the 80s. And back in the day, they had the Avengers Mansion. Now I'm trying to remember where it was actually located. Okay, I got the picture up here. So it was located. This is how crazy these floor plans and things would be back in the day. It literally has like an address where it was located in New York City. They were like, it's located at 721 Fifth Avenue between 70th and 71st at 71st Streets in New York City. And like they have the mansion up top, and they got the basement, the sub-basement, firing range, all these like levels that from the sub levels underneath the mansion, that where all the cool stuff was like hidden, and Quinjets, and the hangar and all that kind of stuff. And it was just cool, and it was synonymous for a long time with the Avengers, like I said, especially like in the 80s. And I just always loved it. And one of the storylines where it got destroyed was Under Siege. I think it was a storyline I reviewed again not too long ago, or I talked about maybe a year or so ago. It's one of my favorite Avengers stories of all time. And when the Masters of Evil come in and they they hold Jarvis hostage and almost beat him to death, and they destroy the Avengers mansion, and then like the Avengers come in and they were out on a mission, they caught him slipping, and it's this huge, just awesome battle in that story, Under Siege. But that's I remember it was jaw dropping because that was the first time like you saw the Avengers mansion like just get tore up. It was like rubble after it was done, and I was like, jaw just dropped as a kid. I just remember how like, oh my god, what did they do? It was like just crazy. Next on the list, I have Scuttlebutt, and and it might sound strange what I'm saying. Some of you probably are like, he's lost it right here. I was with you till you got right here, and now I'm lost. Okay, I'm going to explain myself. Scuttlebutt was a sentient battleship built by the Carbonites using the same technology that was used to create Beta Ray Bill. So it was Beta Ray Bill's race before he was converted to Beta Ray Bill was the race that he's from. They built this ship that was a sentient thing. How it came into being a base of operations or a headquarters was through X Factor. I can't remember who had the ship originally, but they ended up getting the ship, and he used the ship in the early run of X Factor when it was the original 5 X-Men when the book launched. And I don't know, was it during they were fighting Apocalypse or someone, but they got possession of Scuttlebutt, and it was used as their base of operations. I think later Beta Ray Bill gained control of it and used it. It was used by different people over the years, but I remember it most from when I was a kid in the 80s, and they launched that X Factor book, and I was really an X-Men fan. And Walter Simonson and his wife, Louise Simonson, were writing and drawing the book, and I was just so into it. And I just thought Scuttlebutt always looked super cool as a ship, and you know, she would talk to them, and she had her own personality. It was like really just dope, and she's like a wisecracker, smart aleck type thing. And I just always thought it was really cool. So when I was thinking about this list of headquarters, base of operations, I could not forget Scuttlebutt, so I had to add that into the list. Next on the list, I don't think you can have a list like this and not include the Fortress of Solitude. Though we all know that I'm not a huge Superman fan, that I always thought the Fortress of Solitude was really a dope headquarters. And it was very fitting that it was a Fortress of Solitude, because for someone like Superman that is, spread so thin, and he tries to protect everyone all over the world, he would just need a place where he can get away from that and just try to unwind and have that quiet time. So I always felt like that was really fitting for him and his personality, to have something called the Fortress of Solitude. And we've seen it so many, again, like the Batcave, because they've been around for 80 years now. There's so many different permeations and things, how we've seen them in the movies and everything else, that it's so many different takes that we've seen. I always thought it looked cool. I always thought, I think my favorite use of the Fortress of Solitude was in Superman 2, when he was fighting Zod and the villains at the end of the movie, and how it was a character in itself. And I think that's when I really was like, this is a dope hideout. It's not corny. Fortress of Solitude is cool. And I've just always, been enamored and thought like it was really cool. It was very fitting to his, him as a character, and it made sense. And the last one that I have is the Avengers West compound. Some of you are probably looking at me and like, well, Avengers West. Yes, Avengers West Coast was a thing back in the day when I was a kiddo, and again, the 80s, dating myself, that the Avengers split at a point during the 80s, and it was a team that consisted, base team I think was Hawkeye, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Tony Stark, Tigra, Wonder Man. I think that's all I can remember off the top of my head. And Tony had a place on the West Coast, a mansion that he used for the West Coast Avengers. Now, I know we had a more recent series for West Coast Avengers that I think came and went. It got canceled. I think it made 10 to 12 issues. It was recently came out, recently canceled. I was picking that up in trades, and I have both trades, and I think I did a first reads review here, but I haven't read the rest of it yet. So I have it. I need to read it, and I'll review the trades. I'll probably just do a series review and do it here when I get around to it. So it'll probably be coming in the next month or so. But this is the old school Avengers West compound, and I was like looking over some pictures. I was able to Google and find some of the layout for the mansion, and how it had the main floor, second floor, basement, sub basement, level 1, sub basement, level 2, similar to like how the Avengers mansion was in New York, but this was in California. And like, I'm just gonna read some of this from the page from the Marvel Handbook. This is like freaking crazy. The main floor of the neo-Mediterranean style villa retains most of its original functions and furnishings, although there are numerous surveillance and detainment devices to intercept unauthorized personnel. What? This is how detailed they broke this stuff down, and they have like a super like detailed like architectural floor plan that you can like look at. Like, it is insane. But it was just so cool that they used to take the time to do those little touches to just make it even cooler, and that we didn't have to imagine. We could actually visually see the layouts. And then when we saw the comics, we could understand, where are they at? Are they still in the base? Where they are in the base? You could see these diagrams and these flat out, straight up blueprints, architectural blueprints of these hideouts. So it wasn't left to the imagination. You can visually see and understand it a little bit more when you actually saw them in the comic books. So these are just some of my favorite headquarters or base of operations that I could think of that I wanted to do a countdown list on. And I want to hear what you guys think. Do you even think about or care about like superheroes and their hideouts or headquarters or base of operations? I mean, I'm trying to think about some of the books that I read now. Are they as much of a thing? I think far as with Superman and Batman, I mean, with Batman, the Batcave is synonymous. Like, it's always something. It's a character in the book in itself. You always kind of see scenes from the Batcave. He spends more time in the Batcave, probably more than he spends anywhere else. I think for Superman, it's probably a little bit different. Green Arrow had the Arrow Cave, I think, at one point. So I don't really see it as utilized as much. If anything, it's mainly like in team books. They have to have some type of headquarters or someplace that they meet nowadays, but I kind of miss it. I liked always kind of them having somewhere to go back to, not just falling down, broken up in their apartment on the floor, and trying to hide. That's why I really liked the Nightwings. Like, he had a recovery room, so if he got really beat up, it was hidden in between the walls. So like, if people came or like were looking for him, he didn't have to kind of disguise. He could be hidden away in a safe place to recover if needed to be. So they were really, nifty when you see them implemented in a book, and it just shows how much more attention, love, and detail that the creative team puts into it too, especially for a character like a Nightwing, or say like you see a Daredevil or something like that, or like a Moon Knight, that you normally don't see that for, and then they take the time to create that, and then it locks in the character, and it's something that sticks. Unfortunately, with the Nightwing thing, it didn't stick. It was, so to read that, to see that kind of run, it's limited to those books that I mentioned. But for like the Avengers, they will always have some sort of base of operations. Justice League, similar thing, but those again are team books. Individual heroes is kind of hit or miss, but it's always like a cool thing to read and see and imagine about, or see visualized. Like, and now that we get movies and seeing how cool Avengers Tower looks, and things of that nature, or the Guardians like starship, that they live on, so it's always cool to kind of see those things. So let me know, send me an email, comicbooksavant@gmail.com, or just go to comicbooksavant.com, contact me, and send me a message through that. Or if you're in the Savant Society Facebook group, you can just leave a comment there about the episode as well, and tell me some of your favorite hideouts and bases and things like that. I think it's just, I know it's real nerdy. I gotta work with me sometimes. I can't control my nerdism and why I come up with these topics, but I thought it would be fun. So work with me a little bit. Don't talk about me, because I know some of y'all laughing at me and be like, he's really into this stuff. I am. I admit it. It's my fault. But, speaking of the Comic Book Society Facebook group, it's been growing. I appreciate you guys listening to the show, hearing my outpours and cries, and coming in and talking to us. We've been having a really good time. It's grown quite a bit over the past few months or so. Feel welcome if you still listening, you haven't, and if you're on Facebook, I'm not asking you to come to a platform that you're not already on, but if you're already on Facebook, you want a group where you can come in to meet fellow listeners, talk to me, and have just like cool group discussions about just comics, what you're reading, recommendations. We talk about all that stuff and just shoot the breeze with one another to get to know one another. It is easy to find. It is facebook.com/groups/the Savant Society. You request to join. As soon as I see your request, I will approve you. You come right in, introduce yourself, and just jump right into the fray. I think when I first started talking about it, we might have had like 20. Our membership has almost doubled in the past few months. So many of you are coming, been joining and just like spreading your positive. Like, I feel like we have a really positive community and fun community, and we're just talking to get to know one another. And I get to run ideas by you guys and see what you like and don't like, and try to give you content that you guys are going to enjoy. So definitely, if you haven't joined already, do that. If you haven't done that, follow me hit me up on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, both at Comic Book Savant. I still got the cool merch. I got a Teespring store up. The links are on the website. I have, I think it's a support page or store. I think I have a store link up there now. I think I changed it around, and it's a store link, so it'll take you straight to the Teespring store. We have a Savant Society t-shirt. We have a regular Comic Book Savant t-shirt. I'm working with a guy. We're going to have some new designs coming up in the next month or so. I'm going like into the holidays. I'm going to get some refresh and get multiple designs. Brainstorming and working on a lot of cool ideas to, it'll be more than just a logo. It'll be some really catchy stuff and terminology that I use from the different shows and stuff. So I have that in the works for you guys as well. And also, if you like what I do and you want to help support the show, I have a Patreon account, a Patreon campaign. I have different tiers that you get different bonuses for as little as $1 a month. It starts you off, and you can get access to the Comic Book Savant Extra podcast feed. So I do a whole nother Patreon exclusive podcast that I do once a week. So you get double the Comic Book Savant for just $1 a month if you want. And you can check that out. But if not, just keep spreading the love and reaching out, talking to me. I see you guys retweeting and liking my tweets when I put out new episodes or put out new videos, and I really appreciate that. It's helping grow. I'm seeing the numbers grow. The YouTube channel's growing. We just recently broke 400 subscribers, so we're on that road to 500. I'm trying to push them, hopefully get to 1,000 or close to 1,000 as possible by the end of the year. So if you guys can help with that. If you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, it's a lot of good content. I think at this point it's like 100 and almost 130 videos. I have 130 almost unique videos on the YouTube channel. It's not the exact same content here. You get to see my face, and I do slightly different content there, but it's all comic book related. I got television show reviews, trade reviews there as well. So I don't duplicate any content. So it'll be whatever. If you wonder if I covered a certain thing, if you don't see it here, you might want to check the YouTube channel, and it might be a book you're wondering what I think about it. I probably reviewed it over there. And I do a exclusive series called the Comic Book Collector's Guide as well. That's over on the YouTube channel that I've done episodes in the past called like the Comic Book Collector's Handbook here. I kind of formulated that into a whole series that I have about 19 or 20 episodes of so far of the Comic Book Collector's Guide. So definitely check that out if you're getting into collecting comics or new to the hobby and want like a resource type, handbook or collection. I have a whole playlist set up there, so you can go and smash all those episodes out and get a lot of useful information about being new to the hobby. And I talk about a lot of important subjects into starting out collecting. So if you're new to collecting, or even if you're not, I talk about a lot of different subject matter just as in the hobby in general and being a collector or a reader and how it affects you. So definitely, if you have a moment, check all that out as well. But that's all I have for you guys for this episode of the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. Until we speak again, you guys stay safe, be good, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.